Everyone deserves a right to have this deeply human connection to nature.
I just wish that we did a better job exposing the community to these outlets.
It makes me feel like I can connect with something that's greater than me.
When you come out here, you're reminded that this isn't a human-centric world. You know, we're a part of it, but we're not all of it.
It made me really understand nature as a human right.
The time that I spend in the mountains is like a religious experience for me and a way to connect with the universe and to bond with other people.
No matter what comes your way in life, you deal with it or you don't, because you don't have a choice. Life happens and you make the best that you can of it. And in some cases, it's extraordinary.
Learning how to love those difficult things, those uncertainties, those fears, that is where it can be transformative.
Welcome to the 24th Annual Vancouver International Mountain Film Festival presented by Arc'teryx. VIMFF is grateful to Creative BC for their generous support for this year's live panels and workshops, helping making tonight happen. Hello and good night, everybody. My name is Sinica. I've been involved with the VIMFF in various shapes and forms since I moved here from the Netherlands 10 years ago to beautiful BC. Today, I'm on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Wherever you are enjoying the virtual VIMFF Festival, we encourage you to explore your ancestral roots of the lands in which you work and play, and together we can help preserve these mountains and waters for future generations. Please note tonight's event raised funds to support Indigenous Women Outdoors, so thank you everyone for your generous donations with your ticket purchases. If you haven't donated but would like to, please see the link in the chat. Before we continue with the live panel discussion, I have a very exciting announcement to make. For the past 7 years on opening night of the VIMFF, we have presented the Tim Jones Community Achievement Award. We've presented the Tim Jones Community Achievement Award. This award is being presented to a local community member who has made an outstanding contribution to the North Shore sports or outdoor community. Tim Jones was the commander-in-chief for North Shore Rescue for over 24 years and passed away the year we brought this award into the life of the festival. The award represents Tim's legacy as an inspiration to the community to selflessly help others, and it has a mission to educate and share the passion for nature and the love for our backyard mountains. I'm going to quote myself here now. Past years have seen older recipients for the honor, and it was regarded more of a lifetime achievement award. This year sees the youngest winner ever, and with her, the award shifts focus to a younger generation to inspire everyone that making a change and contributing to society does not come with age, but with passion and tenacity. You may already have heard or read about this year's winner, and she's actually now on screen already, and we'll learn why she has been the rightful choice of the jury this year. I'm pleased to announce and to congratulate Maya Antone with the 8th annual Tim Jones Community Achievement Award. Maya, please show everyone your lovely plaque and share some words, and congratulations.
Oh, hoichocha, sienka, chinkwenmen tomi. I'm so honored and grateful to have been nominated by, someone I really look up to, and then to receive the award this year. I'm honestly I'm speechless. I'm so honored that, people recognize the work that I'm doing, and not just my own friends and family, but, people I don't know. That's just so exciting to me. And I really hope to to allow Tim's family and friends to look up to me and to continue this work that I do. To win, you know, a Lifetime Achievement Award at 24 has been very exciting. And it just kind of shows that, you know, inspiration comes from hard work. And now that everyone knows who I am and, you know, I've been in the news, I feel like I have to work even that much harder now. But the work that I do, it's hard work and it's a lot of work, but it's work that I love. And I couldn't imagine doing it for anything else. And, you know, Indigenous Women Outdoors has been my life for the last year. And yeah, I plan on it being my life forever. And I hope that, you know, more Indigenous folks are able to receive awards like this and are able to receive recognition for the work that we do, because I'm not the only one doing this work. I have many friends and family who are doing even harder work than I am. And yeah, so I do this work in their honor, and I'm just so grateful to get to share this with everyone and put this beautiful plaque up on my wall. It smells so good. So thank you so much to Tim Jones's family and the North Shore Rescue and VIMFF. I'm continuously in awe of the work that, you know, North Shore Rescue does, and the volunteers that, you know, put their own lives on the line, and their families are, you know, at home waiting for them to get home. So thank you so much for this award. I'm so excited and honored, and really excited to get to show it off. I would like to pass it off to my friend Sandy, who actually nominated me for this award, which is very exciting, but also to get the night started for our panel.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sandy. I work with Maya with Indigenous Women Outdoors, and welcome to the VIMFF Indigenous Identity in the Outdoors panel discussion. We're super excited about the panelists that we do have. I think that tonight is going to be a really amazing discussion. I just wanted to introduce Indigenous Women Outdoors. We are an organization that is trying to break down the barriers that keep Indigenous folks from entering or accessing outdoor recreational sports. So we have multiple programs going on, including a backcountry mentorship program this winter to get more Indigenous women involved in backcountry skiing. So that's pretty exciting. And then in the summer, we'll be doing a lot of hiking and climbing and mountain biking and all of the things. So we're super stoked on that. But a little bit about myself. I am a split boarder. I've been snowboarding for 20 years. I've been a competitive half pipe rider. I do a lot of backcountry skiing now, and just love the sport. And I love being out on my land, the traditional territory of the Lil'wat Nation. I'm actually calling from the Lil'wat and the shared territory of the Lil'wat and the Squamish people in Whistler, BC. So with that, I would like to pass it on to, we already know Maya. Let's go with Candace.
Thank you so much, Sandy. I tinana hatsametsa chinsqui si shate Squamishchin emash utmisiaya. Good evening. My ancestral name is Hatsametsa. My English name is Candace Campo. I'm the owner-operator of Tulesi Tours, and we've been in business since 2002, offering land-based learning. I currently live in the Squamish community in the village of Camalston in West Vancouver with my family and my children, and we operate in Stanley Park, Squamish, as well as the Sunshine Coast. It's truly an honor to be on this panel discussion this evening. Thank you so much. Hoi. And I will pass it on. Let's see. May I pass it on to Simka?
Ushtakshitsk. Ukla Simka, Histakshits, Tla Ukoyat, Uhooks, Tai Hatwes Nukmis. So I just said my name is Simka Martin. My other Indigenous name is Tli'ik, meaning always feasting and sharing rich woman, which is a name I'm trying to live up to still. And I have a past of being outdoors a lot for cultural tourism in traditional dugout canoes that my father Nupatachit, aka Joe Martin, carves. And I've since moved on from tourism, but continue to have great canoe adventures. And now am a language student of Tla'ukwayat dialect of Nuchanos, as well as teaching what I know in our community. So yeah, really stoked to be here and supporting Indigenous Women Outdoors. Chew. Oh, and I'll pass it on to Michelle.
Oki Nitaniko Michaeli Oliver. I come from the Amskapi Bikani Blackfeet people of the plains, the absentee Shawnee people of the woodlands, the shores of Ireland, as well as the mountains of Italy. Although I grew up away from my homelands on Cheyenne, Ute, and Arapaho lands, also known as the Front Range of Colorado, United States. Currently, I am an adventure photographer, as well as the research director at Native Land Digital, which if you haven't checked it out, it's an amazing mapping organization focusing on looking at the homelands and mapping the homelands of Indigenous peoples all over the world. It's native-land.ca if you guys want to check it out. It's a really amazing organization and online mapping. And a reminder that we're always on Native land. And tonight I am coming to you from my homelands of the Niitsitapi Blackfeet peoples at the intersection of the Absoluke, also known as Crow peoples, the Cheyenne peoples, and the Ochete-Sakowin lands as well. And I will pass it on to Curtis.
Hi, Nadu. My name's Curtis Rattray. My Tahltan name is Nethlan Ats. I'm a member of the Tahltan Nation. And the tribe that I come from within the nation is Nalokotin, which is End of the Ridge Nation. So it's Upper Taku River, Chesley, Nyland River area. I live in Dease Lake, or what we call Tatla, which basically means head of the lake. I do a number of things in the community. I have my own business, but what I do with, I helped a bunch of Tahltans. We created this NGO. And so the things that we do in is community-led monitoring. We're documenting Tahltan knowledge, but the big project that I have the most fun with is leadership development on the land. So we call it holistic Indigenous leadership development. We've got 10 to 14-year-olds in that, and then the older students, the older youth, they go on to Tenemehodihi, which is multi-day backpacking expeditions in Tahltan territory. And that's me. Back to you, I guess, Maya.
Thank you. I'll do a quick introduction. Maya Anton Queensna Tinachin Klawewik My name's Maya. I come from the village in Brackendale here in Squamish, BC, where I'm calling from. I'm a language learner, teacher, language lover, and also I'm the founder of Indigenous Women Outdoors. And we have one more panelist who will make her way when she's supposed to. She's really awesome, and when Chelsea joins the chat, we will get her to do an introduction. But until then, I think I want to talk a little bit about why we're doing this panel and kind of the basis of it. One more kind of quick note is we'll be doing a Q&A at the end of this panel, so you can put all your questions in the chat. That will be there for the Q&A at the end, which we will try to save as much time as we can for, because we know there's going to be some really awesome questions. But we think this is a really important panel, Indigenous Identity in the Outdoors, for lots of reasons. I think, when Sandy and I were talking, it's so important for non-Indigenous folks to really understand the importance of land for Indigenous peoples. We have such different connections to land and different cultures and languages, and the land is really the basis of all of that. It's the basis of our culture, our traditional laws, our languages, everything. And so to have, everyone in this world understand why the land is so important for us is just one step. And then to have non-Indigenous folks understand why, the disconnection, the dislocation of land from Indigenous peoples is so important, and how that affects us today, because the reality is colonization wasn't a one-time event, like we know, in so many ways, but colonization is a reoccurring event every day when we're displaced from our lands and from our territories and our cultures and languages. So tonight's about Indigenous brilliance. It's about celebrating who we are, our connection to land, and getting to share that with as many people as we can. And then also, oh, awesome, perfect timing.
Thank you.
And then also, yeah, just get to celebrate the resilience of Indigenous peoples, and just get to have fun talking about our land, because we all come from different lands and different peoples, and it's super exciting. So before we get into the first question, I'd love for Chelsea, if you're able, just to do a quick introduction. We just did a round, a quick introduction, and then we'll get into the first question.
Miss Saikyo, I am so happy to be here. Hadi Sozi Chelsea McCutcheon, Wet'suwet'en from the community of Wet'suwet. I live and thrive on the unceded traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. And I have been in the snowboard industry for the last 21 years. And 16 of those years have been with the Indigenous Life Sport Academy. And I had the pleasure to spend time with both Maya and Sandy this season with the Indigenous Women Outdoors. And I currently live and thrive in the mountains of Whistler and Squamish and Mount Currie. And I'm very happy to be here.
Quinlan, Tomi, Chelsea, and everyone for your really awesome introductions. So getting into our first question of the evening, as I've mentioned, Indigenous identity is so tied to the land. Everything from our culture and traditions and laws and languages and ways of life, traditional diets come from the land. And that means that we're all so different. The land here in Squamish territory is so different than, Tahltan territory. And so I just wanted to ask everyone, how does your individual and your community identity tie itself to the land? And how does that connection, lead yourself forward in your life and propel yourself forward? So I think I'm going to start with asking Michaeli, if you wouldn't mind going first, and then pass it along.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question, Maya. This is a great one. I think for me, it's been a lot of at first individual identity, and within that searching for community. And since I grew away far from my homelands, I think it's been a lot of using the land and listening to the land in order to find my way back home. And so that being said, my identity to the land is absolutely everything. I didn't know who I was until I stepped forth outside, till I stepped onto my lands. And actually, my dad has a story of when I was a little kid. I would actually, we had one of those little bouncy horses that are on like 4 legs, and you can like ride them around. And I would always ride that horse around and tell my dad that I was going to Montana. And my dad didn't really fully understand why, because his family had left Montana. He's like, why would you want to go back? I don't understand. But it's my homelands. It's where I'm from. It's where my ancestors are from, and I've always wanted to go back. And so then through that like desire as a kid to be back in this like hole and this like missing piece of wanting to be back on my homelands, I've then since like learned my community's connection, and been able to see the ways in which, yeah, like you said, we thrive from our ancestral foods, whether it's like choke cherries or blackberries or bison, and just like the way your body feels differently when you eat those ancestral foods as well. I think I'm getting away from the question a little bit, but I'll pass it on to Curtis.
Thanks. With me, it's my Tahltan name. So my Tahltan name is Nethglan Adz, and it refers to the ground after the caribou have walked on it. So Neth in our language is ground. And I used to work for BC Parks as a backcountry ranger in the late 90s, mid 90s and stuff like that. And I, you know, when you're backpacking, your mind goes into these different places so that you're trying to ignore the pain and the thirst and the hunger and all that stuff and the sore feet. And one day I was in Spatsizi and I was going up this plateau. So there's a hill going up, a slope, and I looked down and there's caribou tracks. And I just started to realize that, hey, I'm following caribou tracks. And so that's kind of my real first time that I really started thinking about my name and how it ties with my identity. And I started to understand like why I started have this attraction to caribou and things like that. So that's one of the things. And the other one is the clan name that I come from, which is Nalakutin. And it means end of the ridge nation. And I've only been up in that country once, and it was in the winter time, but it was spiritual for me in the sense, and connection for me in the sense that caribou ended up coming out. And after everybody had taken off, I just stayed behind a little bit and looking at the scenery and stuff. And then here these caribou walked out in front of me about 800 meters away or something like that. So I just thought that was really unique. And so it started to help me recognize my own identity and linking back to my clan and the territory where my family comes from. And then I will pass it on to Chelsea.
Masai Curtis, my identity specifically with nutrition in my traditional territory and what feeds my soul was ultimately the mountains, which was the avenue of social change within my family, which come from the traditional territory of the Wet'suwet'en. I grew up on the community of Wet'suwet'en, which is 1,100 kilometers north from where I currently live right now. It's a 2-day drive. And the traditional territory that my grandfather, Leonard George, who held the title of Smogglescum, which is he was the hereditary chief of the Sun House. His territory was within about 400 kilometers between Smithers and Prince George. And within that region, my parents connected to sobriety, which ultimately created a pathway for me to use skiing and snowboarding as a holistic avenue, which allowed me to connect to the mountains at a whole nother level. It was within healing and a legacy for my children to find another way. So I connected to skiing as a ski racer, and then snowboarding at the age of 15, which is when I started teaching, which led me to a long path within mountain guiding it through snowmobiling, snowboarding. Now at this point, it's hiking and rock climbing, and as a mountain bike guide as well. It's definitely left an imprint within my life, within my family's life, and an avenue where I can share my gifts back at my home community and connect with them in a way of healing and a way of being able to find possibilities. So I hope that answers your question. Connection to the mountains. I will pass this question on to Candace.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Where to begin? My grandmother was born in 1909, and when she was 12 years old, she was beckoned by one of the elders, and this elder married into our clan, the Hanechin, and Hanechin is located at the head of Queensreach. It's one of the 4 main clans of the Seashaw people. And the woman who married into our people came from who we call the Lahuels people, the Mount Currie and Pemberton peoples. And for thousands of years, our peoples as neighboring tribes intermarried with each other. And this woman who married into our village, into our clan, she traveled over the glaciers. And how the people would travel over the glaciers, they would wait for the snowpack in spring so there'd be enough snowpack in the crevices. in the hopes that if he did fall in a crevice, he might have a fighting chance. And to extend that chance of survival, our people would travel with the really long Douglas fir saplings, which might catch you. So I think of this courageous woman who lived amongst our people, and the Lahuels people. They came over in the spring to live with our people because we would have one of the earlier salmon runs, and that good life and that way of life and resources were all shared. And Chatsa Metza, the name that I now carry that was passed on to me from my grandmother, Etza is the Lahuels word for material woven together, and Chats is to always be there. So my name, my aspiration in life is deeply connected to the land, and I carry on the love of story as my grandmother did, and the gifts and the skills that I've been given and provided in life as an outdoors person, to be a kayaker, a hiker, is my responsibility to share that with the next generation. And I've did it in a small way through my business, but now I see our younger generation with their strength and power bringing it full circle, such as Maya and Sandy. So to me, that's one aspect of my connection to the land, because when we go up the inlets and we're paddling in our territories, we're going to connect with our ancestors. And when our company sometimes travels in another territory, we bring a member from that territory who naturally will get a complimentary 7-day kayak tour because that's their land. But we also want their ancestors to know that we are good people, and we ask them to communicate to their ancestors while we're being guests on their land. Olmomsh, thank you. Simka, did you get a chance to share yet?
No, I think you will go now.
Thank you so much.
So to locate myself a little more, I'm on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And when I think about identity in terms of our land, I feel a need to expand it a little bit to the elements, the fire, the land, the earth, the water, hehma, the air, and how they all come together and manifest as our unique territories that we live on. And so for here, it's our Tlaokoyat country is as much the ocean, the rivers, the lakes, as the land, the mountains and islands. And I was lucky enough to grow up in a home that is right beside the beach in our territory, and it's actually surrounded by beautiful tall Sitka spruce trees, tohmapt, tall, strong, beautiful hardwood trees. And as I grew up, I became aware that it was known as Pacific Rim National Park Reserve, and so that's like the colonial overlay. And of course, we weren't asked as Tlaokoyat community to have this designation. It was just imposed. And then later on, as I grew up, my father would share things with me about, we drive along the highway beside this beautiful lake, Ha'ukman, which, if anyone knows Kennedy Lake, it's the biggest lake on Vancouver Island. And he would like smack me on the shoulder. "There's your lake. That's your lake," extending his arm out wide. And then as I continued to grow with that knowledge, the beauty of the community ownership of our lands and waters, and ownership in, I feel like we need to use different language in the colonial language to create the understanding of the importance of our connection to place, because otherwise there isn't really like the understanding that it's ours, but it's as much ours to kind of have as it is ours to take care of. So that stewardship is so important. And on a community level of identity, where I am is also called Indian reservation land. It's also an ancient village site that, goes far past any such terms such as Indian reservation. But I've, witnessed the pain and the suffering, the social problems of my people here growing up that continue. And I also see the resilience and the beauty that comes when we gather, especially when we get into our traditional mode of transportation, these canoes that I'm so lucky to have access to through my father. And we do these intertribal canoe journeys up and down the coast, or we did pre-COVID. And it's so beautiful to watch the youth light up in a way and connect with that ancestral way of traveling and multi-day journeying. Over to you, Maya.
Thank you, everyone, for those answers. What I think is really cool and really amazing is, I think if I asked everyone here that same question, next week, a year from now, 5 years from now, the questions would be different, because as we kind of live our lives and we learn more about who we are, we learn about our identity, and we learn about our community's identity, the land. So I really appreciate all of your answers right now, and being so vulnerable with us to share that piece. What I'm really hearing is that, yeah, we come from the land. We really, we are the land in so many ways, and it's such a life journey to understand that. And maybe some of us are a bit younger, but we have such a deep connection that it's there, and when the time's ready, you step into that. So thank you, everyone, so much for sharing that. I'm going to pass it off to Sandy for the next question.
Again, thank you guys so much for sharing. Candace, I would love to get into the glacier travel between our nations. I think that would be so amazing. I'm actually studying one of the stories right now at a later time. But yeah, I was just wondering, can we pinpoint a specific moment in our life where we felt a special connection to our surroundings? Can you share what you felt, where it was, what was so special about that location? We, in the Lil'wat Nation, we have a saying that's, the people and the land are one. We're not complete without our connection to the land, and we need to respect it. Can you think of a time where you felt a strong connection to that land? It could be a happy time, a time of fear, relaxation, anything really. I'd love to hear from McKelly.
Awesome. Thanks for that question. It's a really good one. And I think the first thing that came to mind actually was a hard time in my life. And I alluded to earlier, just like this hole I felt inside as I was trying to reconnect with my culture and find out who I was after a long history of being separated from my homelands and from my people. And in a particularly dark time in my life, I decided just to drive out to my homelands and see what happens there. And as I got closer and closer to the homelands on the road, I started getting this feeling, and it's kind of like this goosebumps, but also combined with a good feeling where you're almost about to cry. And right, almost like when I crossed over the arbitrary border, right, where it was just like, I'm in my homelands where my people moved and where my people lived and thrived. And actually a large golden eagle swooped right in front of my car. I almost crashed my car actually. And my heart started beating really fast, and I pulled over to make sure that it was really a golden eagle, because I was worried I was hallucinating. And golden eagle in my language is pitao. And so I just like pulled over and got out of the car and yelled like hawak sukapi, like thank you pitao. Thank you for gifting me with almost like this sign and just this message from the creator. And the first thing that came to my mind to do was just get out of the car and throw my hands into the soil. And I think the moment that I was able to do that, and I had to break, it was winter, so I had to like break through the ice barrier at the top because Montana is very cold. And I threw my hands into the soil and just started crying. And It was just like this beautiful connection where all that I could do for what the land had just gifted me was give it my water, give it my tears. And to me, that was such a sign and such a way of bringing me back into, Michaela, you are supposed to be on these lands, and someday, hopefully you can get back to these homelands and back to these peoples and your peoples, and to your culture, because you're supposed to be here. And Patau came and gifted me with that idea, and with that almost like permission to be back, and that it is time for me to be back on those lands. Yeah, I'll pass it on to Curtis.
I was thinking the eagle had welcomed you home. That's what I was thinking about in that story. My experiences is Mounted Zaidza, and my first time I was up there, we spent about 12 days or something like that. I was working for BC Parks at the time, and it was toward, like, we'd been up on the mountain for 7-8 days or something like that, and it's hot, tired, hungry, the body's hurting, and my mind is just wandering into different places, and we're walking along the lava sand, and all of a sudden I started to hear this sound as I was walking, this hollow sound, dun, 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 as I was walking, and I go, and I came to, and I realized that was the sound that my grandmother kept telling me about. So in Tahltans, we call that place Edzi Tha'a, and that refers to the sound you make when you're walking on this, the hollow sound you make when you're walking on that lava sand. And so when I heard that, I came to it, I just brought me right back to reality, and it made me realize that the purpose and how our people name places is based on that place's characteristics and personality and that spirit of that place. And so that really kind of solidified that whole connection, because there's other things that were going on in those 8 days leading up to that, and that just kind of like woke me right up and made me realize how important our people, how we perceived place, and how we connected to place, and just by feeling and finding the essence of that place and giving it that name based on that. So I'm going to pass it on to Candace.
Thank you, Curtis. Sometimes that specialness to the land may not be your own experience. On my grandfather's side, Alatsonai, they are the clan of the Mayok, the grizzly bear, and the tool makers and the hunters. And my older cousins, who are hunters for our family, share their experiences with me about the animals and being able to spend that extended time on the land during that period. They just teach me things that I'm so awestruck with, because I tend to spend a lot of my time on the land. If not on the snowshoe trails, I'm in a kayak on 7-day trips, so I don't experience that same time of year as them. But one of the things that my cousin had told me was that when the elk are feeding, the matriarch, the eldest female elk within the herd, will not eat, but she'll look around, and she'll keep an eye out for her family. So it's just those little special stories. But I've had many special moments on the land within our territory. But one of the ongoing memorable things is spending time with your community on the land, because sometimes I think where we live within these urban centers or on the reservation system, in these small spaces, I find that when our people are on the land, we get to build a special relationship with each other, and the level of communication is so open-hearted. So those are the very sacred times that I really appreciate on the land. And I just wanted to conclude that when I dream, I mostly dream. I can dream about people, but I dream just as much about animals. I dream about killer whales and seals and sea lions, and I feel so fortunate to have that connection and that perception of our world. Thank you. All right, may I pass it on to Chelsea?
Miss Candace, what was that moment? And that is actually a very that's a big question, because I think that moment happens throughout your entire life, just as Maya mentioned about the unfolding of that identity as a Indigenous woman, as an Indigenous girl, as an Indigenous child, that we are going through the modern times, may I say, with this identity of not seeing yourself. So therefore you're put in the ultimate responsibility of creating that image, being that person, and stepping up and saying yes for the pathway and legacy for others. That's a big responsibility. It's quite heavy, but so worth it. So I'm part of the Laxiliu clan, which is small frog. Part of the Wet'suwet'en, and the frog is identified as generally seen on a mask of a shaman. The frog is generally sitting on its forehead, which is the messenger of the underworld or of the many realms. And with that identity of the amphibian that both can thrive in the water and on the land, the one who can hear the ancestors and just remember, because it's within our bones, the minerals within our blood, and also the connection that vibrates through the earth. And as an Indigenous woman thriving on the unceded traditional territory of both the Squamish and the Lillooet Nation, I've been learning that my great-grandmother, Mary Wells Saibesa, she was matriarch of the Sun House, Luxamisu clan, which is the Big Frog clan, who was married to my great-grandfather, Thomas George Gidsathwe. He was part of the Gudumdan clan, which is the Bear clan. And so Mary Wells was from the Lillooet Nation. So ultimately having lineage within the area that I currently, I feel like I thrive in and that I'm growing and expanding in. And so there's pretty much any time that I am stepping foot on any land, if that's in my household or out in the soil in my backyard or 14 hours north from my hometown, I'm constantly connecting to the vibration of Mother Earth, which is ultimately constituted by the sun, the moon, and the galaxies that surround us, because my experience in the outdoors ultimately connects me to my land and my ancestors. And as I remember last week when I was in the Cayush Pass, the territory, the border, definitely sent memories that I didn't remember within my current mind, but within my body, of my ancestors that are connected to my great-grandmother, Mary Wells. So that feeling, that ultimate aha moment is happening all the time. The Grease Trail, as an example, which is ultimately a trail network that goes from Prince Rupert and connects to Vancouver. And there's a spider web that goes to Winnipeg and beyond, which is a trail that is still identified now. And it's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years for trading purposes. And the ultimate trading purpose was ooligan grease, a medicinal, oily substance that comes from the greasiest fish in the north. But it was a hot commodity because of its medicinal purposes. That is like a trail that is a story that connected all of our people, in community. I will pass this on to Curtis if you didn't have the chance. Miss Saikyo.
Yep. Yeah, I spoke. Yeah.
You did speak. Okay, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
I think it goes to Maya or somebody. I think everybody's
Maya?
done, isn't it?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we'll pass it to Simka, and then I'm going to sneakily pass it to Sandy to answer the question also, and then we'll do a Q&A.
Sounds good.
So for myself, I had so many moments as well, but I'll pick one or two. So I feel like there's so much beauty in retracing journeys of our ancestors. And in Tla'ukwayat, there is an area that my family went back to within the territory when the smallpox disease was an epidemic in our region. And I believe there was a couple waves of it. So the first time I went with my family back to that place where our family had gone in the past and quarantined themselves for 4 years, was really special and powerful. And I got to see the place where they lived. And yeah, that was a really special moment for me. And another moment was there's this mountain on the highway that is in our territory, Highway 4, Tlachitli. It means stands alone, and it's a really, really pointy mountain. Our mountains aren't nearly as tall as the ones you guys have on the mainland, but to me, it was the most impressive, pointy, rock top, sharp mountain. And every time we'd drive by it to get to the city, I would just be like, wow, that mountain. And in, I think it was my late 20s, I finally got to climb it with the knowledge that my whale hunting ancestors had climbed up there to pray in advance of and in preparation, spiritual preparation for whale hunting practices. And so I just kept visualizing as I was climbing up this mountain with my friends, a barefoot ancestor climbing up there, and I was wearing shoes, and I was thinking, wow, that's so amazing. And near the top, I was getting really tired, and I didn't think I was going to make it. And at the time, I didn't have very good gear. I had totally inappropriate shoes and backpack, so I was kind of off kilter. And we stopped for a snack, and I had some yummy smoked salmon in my bag, and I was munching away. And then it was time to continue the rest of the way up the mountain. And I was kind of like, I think I might have to stay here, guys. But then there was there was a bear. And I was like, oh no, I can't stay here. I got to keep going with the group because I got salmon in my backpack. So yeah, we made it. And I had a couple moments on the rock face where I was just like freezing, where you're kind of just in a sketchy position. And then you're like, I don't want to move. I might fall to my death. But luckily my friends were a little more pro and they helped me up. And similar to Michelle, sorry, I don't have your other name down in my head, but I just kind of burst into tears at the intensity of that moment, finally getting to get up there, and also just the intensity of that environment, the wind rushing up the mountain. Yeah, so those were two special moments for me too.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for sharing those moments. I really want Sandy to talk about her experiences because I know she put this question in here for a reason. But I think we'll save that for the next event. Hopefully there'll be another one in the future. But we're gonna do some of the questions from the Q&A. So our first question is, as a white settler, is it possible to move through the land in daily life and when recreating in a way that respects, acknowledges, and celebrates the history of the people and the land? And if yes, could you share some ideas of how I can contribute to making the outdoors a safer space? So if you do need to reread that question, it's in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. But I think I'm going to start off with Candace, if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Thank you. I really think about that because sincerely, you know, within an Indigenous perspective, like we really understand our world, our environment, the forest, the animals, that we're literally related to them. We see them as our family, our relatives, even though we need them to survive, such as salmon and berries. And to ask a non-Indigenous person to hold that beliefs, it's not my place to ask them to have that level of spirituality, but one of the things I think we need to consider is like, we have these rights to access the nature, to access the environment, but I think as a collective, we all really need to look at our responsibilities and like look at our direct responsibilities to the land and the impacts we impose on the land. And but I think as a citizen, to like give thanks to the land is a good start, and to acknowledge what the land actually truly gives us, which is wellness, health, food. I'm going to think a little bit more about that, but I'm also going to say, like, if we are a community with each other and we're a community with the land, we as a collective, as a society, also need to consider in giving back, which is giving back to people, which is giving back to underprivileged, which is given back to youth who are living through a pandemic, children who are living through a pandemic, because previous generations have really made a muck of our world. And I think as an adult, we have responsibility to provide opportunities for children to experience nature, and for families with moderate means to experience nature. I think that's all of our responsibility. Thank you. I think that's a great question. Olnom Shoi.
Thanks, Candace. So we do have a Q&A function at the bottom. If anyone listening and watching has any questions, feel free to put them there. I'm gonna send it to Curtis to answer this question.
To acknowledge place, what our ancestors used to do is they would just make an announcement. When you arrived at a place, you would announce, "I am here." And so it's your way of recognizing and acknowledging that place and letting that place know that you've arrived. So that's one of the things that you can do in regards to acknowledging place. And the other thing is, don't take from the land. Don't brag about it, because there's some, like I had one of the people that I worked with my boss at BC Parks. He grew up in Kananaskis in the 60s and the 70s, and he talked about how the mountaineering culture has changed from, you know, just being out on the land, being happy to be out on the mountains. And he's saying that culture has changed. So now people are like, they're climbing mountains to put another notch in their belt. And so that's kind of showing disrespect to the land and the place. So don't think of it as a conquest and that type of thing, and adding it to your list of mountains that you've climbed. Just be aware that, you know, that's showing a lot of disrespect to the place, and they will be able to feel and know that. So be really careful, because if you don't, in our people, we have a thing called A'i, which is bad luck. And if you show disrespect for the land, it can harm you. For an example, we killed a grizzly bear one time, and the next day there was this blizzard, and I just couldn't help this feeling that we pissed off that grizzly, and that grizzly made that blizzard. And when I talked to elders about it, they said, yeah, that's what happened. And the other thing is just research history. If you're going into a certain area, try to learn as much as you can about a certain area and a certain place, and try to find what you can about the culture and the cultural aspects of that place that you're going to. Okay, Maya?
Okay, Chris, thank you. Those are really good. That's really good advice. I'm gonna pass it to Chelsea, and then from there we'll do one more question, and then it's the end.
Miss Sai, I often every step that I take, I mentioned it's basically in prayer and gratitude of just being alive, just being here, that my heart, and it's scientifically proven that our heart is connected to Mother Earth and that we're pulsating at the same rate, which then tells you that we're connected to the moon because the Earth is constituted by the gravity of the moon, and it goes on and on and on. So ultimately it comes in reciprocity, right relationship. And when that right relationship sits well with me and within my heart and my soul, and I come introducing myself, such as Curtis mentioned, and also asking permission within the land. And it might feel kind of funny at first, perhaps if you're not used to it, but the permission is coming within that you are thriving on this traditional territory, even if you don't know the history, that you're acknowledging that you're there and that you are in the best way trying to be in right relationship, and through your example and by living through that as best as possible, that's all we can really do. And then from there, every walk you learn, you deconstruct what you've known before, and then you just keep on evolving. And I think it's proven through life that that's all we can do as human beings. Maya.
Awesome. I'm gonna take over from there. That was like really good information. Thank you guys. I do have one more question for the evening. I'm gonna direct this to Simka. I know you're on the west coast of Vancouver Island, lots of parks there. If you could change a national or provincial park in your land in terms of management designation, or anything else, what would you change?
It's a great question because we do have a lot of provincial and national parks that are within Tla'ukwayat. And the amazing thing is that the answer in response to that question is already a reality. It's called Tla'ukwayat Tribal Parks. And it is an initiative that was born out of a time when one of our islands with ancestral ancient rainforest garden, what many people would know as old growth garden or old growth forest, was under direct threat of clear-cut logging. And our community rallied together, and it always amazes me to think about because it was the year that the last residential school was closed down in this area. So people had the strength to gather and stand together as a community, not only including Tla'ukwayat, but Ahousaht, our neighboring First Nation who has shared territory on the same area, and residents of Tofino all came together to do what they could to protect that area from the logging. And our nation decided to declare this place a tribal park, with the idea, tribal indicating that it's of our tribe, of our nation, and park being a very simple way to convey an area of conservation. However, it is not the equivalent to a national park where it's a very kind of separatist model of like humans don't belong in the park and it's just for recreation and wildlife. In our way of knowing, there is no such thing as like the wilderness, because it's all place that you do take care of. It's all part of the garden. And yeah, the Tribal Parks Initiative has grown since that time to include our entire traditional territory. And I think that this also feeds into a little bit of the last question of how to be respectful. I think it's like what Candace was saying, like finding out about the area that you're in. And so if you come to Tla'ukwayat and you find out about Tla'ukwayat tribal parks, you can find out that there's been a whole land visioning process, a land relationship visioning process, whereby, you know, we have certain areas that we've designated for appropriate sharing, and then we have other areas that are like kind of leave it alone for now, take care of it, leave it for future generations, take good care of it. So it's a really interesting and beautiful thing that's been done here, that we are still building up because right now it's chronically underfunded and undersupported. So there's something called the Tribal Park Allies program, which is asking local businesses to contribute percent to this, because Tofino is the town that's local here. It's just a little municipality, but it benefits greatly off of our territory. It's really, Tofino is just a launch point for this beautiful territory that is Tlaogoyet, and then house it to the north and Heshgoyet further up. So I think that would be my answer to that one. Chu.
That's very beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I'm really interested to learn a little bit more about that. I'm going to ask Michaeli, because you're in the United States, how are things different there compared to up here in Canada? So I'll ask you the question once again. If you could change a national or, I guess, state park in your land in terms of management, designation, or anything else, what would you change?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, in university and school, I studied forest and fire ecology, specifically looking at sacred fire practices. And I looked at my people's, the Blackfeet people's sacred fire practices a little bit, but I actually ended up working with the Karuk people in the most northern part of California. And there I learned a lot about what can happen and what power can be given from kind of an idea of co-management. And I want to caveat and say that I believe that co-management is a first step. I want to see Indigenous peoples, I want to see tribes and nations with complete control over their own homelands. But that being said, within the national forests in the states, we have kind of like state forests or like state parks. And then we have national forests, and they're all kind of these protected lands, but and what we call public lands. And the history of these lands is actually really horrible. Basically, in a nutshell, they were sanctioned off areas of land that were set aside for future resource extraction. And so these portions of land were set aside specifically for lumber. And so the Karuk people, in their case, since they're in the woodlands in the Klamath Mountains up there in Northern California, their lands were taken from them and then sanctioned as these forests and these state parks, these national forests, in order for eventually the timber industry and logging, and all their fire practices were stopped. And so the Karuk people specifically worked with fire for a variety of different reasons. They've worked with fire for the health of the acorns, which is one of their protein sources, as well as other different kind of random things that you wouldn't expect. Something I thought was super interesting that I actually found out is similar with my tribe, the Blackfeet. Fire actually will break up debris and create habitat for salmon on rivers. So just all these small little pieces, and everything is connected. And so the Karuk people would start fires on these lands, and then they would then work with the lands, and the lands would gift them food, and they would give back food, and this was their way of stewarding, one of their many ways of stewarding, but it was a really important one. And so then when national forests were put up and their fire practices were taken away from the lands, not only did the people suffer and not get food and not have access to food sources, but the forest suffered as well. And actually fire danger, and this intense fire danger began to just skyrocket. And so today in California and all over the United States, because of the systematic stripping of sacred fire practices, you see a ridiculous amount of fire danger. The trees don't know fire. They haven't seen fire in about 100 years. And so they don't know what to do when fires are started. Because the only natural igniter is lightning, and other than that, it's human beings. And so if we don't know how to work with the forest with this fire, then we don't know what to do. And so anyway, that was a long way of talking about co-management, and how the Karuk people have actually started to do this program called TREX, TREX, and it's a prescribed fire training, essentially, where tribal leaders are then teaching Forest Service, like firefighters, and different heads all over the country, all over the United States, how to work with prescribed fire and using their ancestral knowledge and then passing it on. And this kind of exacerbated fire danger has led to the point where in the state's Forest Service heads and individuals, and they're actually starting to listen to tribal leaders and finally like, oh, you guys were right. We should have known that. And the fire danger is now so intense, we don't know what to do. And the Karuk people, I mean, this is happening with intertribally all over, including the Blackfeet. But they were like, okay, well, we will now show you. And as long as we get access to our ancestral homelands, we would love to show you what prescribed fire is, and kind of how you manage fire in the forests, so that the forests are safer for all. Because once the trees start to become resilient to the fires and they start to know fire again, then we won't see these crazy large crown fires that we see today. So I really see kind of this like change within national parks and national forests, and hopefully settlers and these heads of the national parks and forests will start listening to Indigenous knowledge and traditional ecological knowledge that has been right all along. Yeah, I hope that answers the question. That's a good one. Hawa.
Yeah, I mean, you both answered the question so beautifully. Thank you. So just to respect time, I know we're going a little bit over. There is a really great question to end things off. So I do want to put it to each of you. Just this question that really wraps up identity again. And then after that, we'll say our thank yous. We're going to put a resource slide up on the screen. So where you can find all of these lovely folks and how you can really support Indigenous peoples. But so the final question is, is there any upcoming project or experience that you are most excited for that feels nourishing for the ongoing life journey of, discovering your identity? So is there anything in your near future that, you're really excited about? So quick final question, we'll wrap it up. And this has been a really amazing discussion. So I'm gonna pass it off to maybe Simka to go first.
Thank you. A potential, not a for sure, for me is I've been inspired by a young person in New Toronto's community, Pauline Jules, who wrote a grant and is now carving a canoe with my father. And people my whole life have asked me, like, are you going to be a canoe carver like your dad? And I'm like, no, I don't really have like the carving knack. And I still kind of feel that way, but seeing Valine and going to visit the site, that's what really struck me the last time. And I've had this feeling a number of times, but the last time I went to visit the site, it's just so beautiful. It was like pulled off on the highway and walked through the woods, and it had just snowed actually. And they had set up a tarp over the canoe that they were working on. And it's just that beautiful, quiet pillowiness of the snow. And it just felt like this little oasis of beautiful cultural knowledge transmission with my father and Valine and two young men as well working there. And I didn't want to leave, but I had to leave pretty quickly because the car was parked somewhat precariously on the side of the road. But yeah, I just had to talk with someone about it afterwards, and they were like, well, you could write a grant too. And I'm like, well, I just like had a moment of like, is that selfish? Because other people could be better learners, and it is really important that more people learn. But then I'm like, no, I can bring those people in. So I'm hoping to do that, to carve a whole canoe with my father and some other folks.
Thank you. Candace, I'll get you going next.
Thank you. this spring when COVID hit, it was like everybody was on lockdown. We were homeward bound and literally bound to home. And one of the things, like, I had to step into nature, and I spent a lot of time in kayaks, canoes, and hiking. And I started to use my camera because I knew there was a lot of elders in our community who don't get to access these trails. So I started doing FaceTime and then Zoom tours, and it grew into possible inspiration. And I'd like to say with some excitement that this year we're engaging in a film project, and it's We Are the Land, or Slanayata, which is a perspective based on women, youth, children, and LGBTQ2. So our perspective of the land. So that's in early research and production, and I'm extremely excited about it. Thank you.
Oh, that's so exciting. Awesome. McKaylee?
Great, that was perfect transition. I'm also going to talk about a film I'm very excited for. I recently had the opportunity to be and I'm still in the process of being the photographer on a film called Spirit of the Peaks. And it's, again, kind of in the initial, we just filmed our first week of it, and it probably will be a long time before it's out. But if you guys want to follow us on Instagram, it's Spirit of the Peaks, just spelled normally. And we'll be putting up updates on that. And the film is centered on what it means to be a guest on Indigenous lands as an Indigenous person. And so it is centered on, and the story kind of revolves around my brother and one of my best friends who's Lakota, and his name is Connor Ryan. He's actually Sacred Stoke on Instagram if you want to support him as well. But the film discusses kind of what it means to him, because like me, he grew up away from his ancestral homelands and has grown up skiing and interacting with Ute lands mostly. And so we kind of explore that. And I think relating back to some of the questions that were asked tonight with being a settler on Indigenous lands. And to me, that's just being a guest on Indigenous lands and what that means. And this film explores that. And then another really cool thing regarding to my job, kind of what COVID did for all of us, I think, and especially myself as being a photographer and a research director at Native Land, is I just wanted to tell the stories of Indigenous people mostly. And so we just launched, or are launching, in the process of launching, a YouTube series. And we're hopefully going to be featuring Indigenous stories and centering on Indigenous peoples. And our Instagram is going to start being a lot more storytelling, revolving around stories. And so that's going to be a really cool project. And I think for me, I learn most through stories, like most Indigenous peoples. And so learning from and hearing the stories of other Native folks from around Turtle Island is just a really incredible way to explore all of our very unique and beautiful Indigenous identities in the outdoors. So be on the lookout for those two beautiful stories. And I'll pass it on to Curtis.
Thanks. I've got a lot of good projects going on, but I think for me, for my own personal identity, it's about being a Tahltan teacher. So one of the things that, because of COVID last year, we couldn't take any youth out on the land. So what we did was we started developing a Tahltan guide training program. And so we wanted certified guides as Tahltan guides. And we're looking at ensuring that these guides can work with traumatized youth. So we're teaching about intergenerational trauma-informed practices on the one hand for the wellness component, and then there's the Indigenous cultural Tahltan experiences on the land. So the cultural component of it, there's the Western science component of it, and there's also the leadership development component of it. So those are the things that we're focusing on with the guide training. And for my own identity, my grandmother taught me how to tan moose hides, and I was really fascinated with her teaching approach and how that teaching approach is quite different. So I'm really interested in exploring my identity as an Indigenous teacher. and I'll pass it on to Chelsea.
Misai Curtis. I feel like I'm inspired by the evolution of our community, our people. We're at a really fun time where everybody seems to be supported to be recognized in what they are specializing in, what their disciplines are, and what they have to bring to community. So by being a part of this great movement, which, you know, I have to credit, it didn't just start now. It goes back to my ancestors, my parents, my aunties, the community that raised me. It is a great responsibility to step up as an Indigenous woman in this time space reality to identify ourselves in a way that we were here for a very long time, thriving on the traditional territory, and that we bring skills that are used today. And it's quite impressive to see that the idea of New Age was actually ancient ways. So, and that we are able to connect to that in a way that it's, you know, through a career oriented way. And I feel really, really blessed to be in this position to tell our stories in a healing way. Yeah, Misai, and moving on.
Oh, Chinquinman Tomiyap. Thank you, everyone, especially to our guests, for speaking and sharing yourselves with us tonight. What we have on the screen right now is just a couple of resources that we've kind of piled together for some of the panelists' information, a couple of resources just about, you know, a general idea of what we've talked about with Indigenous identity, a couple books of Indigenous identity, and yeah, thank you to our guests for sharing. I feel in such awe, and I'm so inspired by each and every one of you. Thank you to all of the festival sponsors, you know, including Arc'teryx and Creative BC. Check out the rest of the festival. You know, there's still some more going on. There's 50 films that are going. There's more discussions and workshops. And once you have your pass, you have 30 days to access all the movies and all the workshops going on. So we're going to leave this up for a bit. Chinquinman Tomi up to everyone. I'm so grateful from the bottom of my heart. So happy you all were able to show up in the way that you did. So thank you, and have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.